So you got accepted to a convention. Now what you're going to want to do is start preparing, which means getting all your supplies intact, making sure that you have everything that you're going to sell. So one very helpful hint with what you're going to want to sell, have a variety. Like, don't just have prints, don't just have buttons. Unless that's your thing. If your group is specifically about making buttons, there's sort of a difference there, but if you're just in general artist, then you're going to want to have a lot of stuff there so that you have a variety. One thing that can help is if you work with friends, because then you can pool all of your stuff together so that you don't wind up paying so much for the table per person, and it also helps with having a variety. Now if you are working with a group, make sure that you get deadlines set so that everybody gets everything in on time. Organize yourself for this group. Make sure that you have everything in on time, make sure you have someone in charge of specific things, check in with everyone about how they're doing from time to time. I usually do that about once a week with my people. Organize your schedules ahead of time with who's going to be selling during what time periods. A helpful hint is to have 2 people there at all times. It just helps so that you don't get lonely, but you don't have it crowded. 2 is a good amount of people to have. Also, it may sound manipulative, but try and not rely on others. Like, don't rely on your best friend who's helping you sell at this convention, because you never know if he has to cancel. If you need something done, you get it done. Don't have someone else get it done for you. Make sure that as much as possible, you get done what you need to, so that everyone is responsible for what they do. Now, prints are kind of a gray area nowadays because you don't realize it, but it becomes a chore for whoever buys it. With something like hats or shoes or buttons, you can easily just find a quick place to put it on or put it in a bag or whatever. With paper though, it can easily crumble and it can easily bend, and then people don't feel like they get their money's worth. So, and even then, all they can really do with a print is hang it up on a wall. People like to buy stuff that they can show off. People like to razzle-dazzle their friends. People like to show, oh dude, look at these nice shoes I got, or look at this hat. Don't get me wrong, prints can be good, but don't make them your front runner. Now remember, it's always quality over quantity with prints if you choose to sell them. Don't make 100 prints that nobody's going to buy. Maybe have like 5 or 10 prints, if this is your first convention, that you put a lot of time and effort into so that people will consider buying them if they do want to buy a print. Another thing that's really helpful for when you're selling is to create sets. Sets are a big thing with when you're selling at anime conventions, because someone may look at a set of some of their favorite characters and say, oh, I only really like L from Death Note, for example. So then they buy L, and then they're like, well, now I want all those other ones. So then they start putting more money to try and get the complete set that you've made. Buying a complete set is just a habit with most people have with collecting. Collecting is a natural habit between all of us, and we always want to get all of one thing. We don't want one of one thing. Button sets are the best way to go with sets, because if you make a set of prints, again, it becomes a chore for the people who buy it. But also with buttons, they can easily be tacked on, and they're cheap. Buttons and pins are cheap, and they're easy for people to buy. It's all very helpful. Another helpful hint for when you're selling stuff is to look at what's popular. You may not like something yourself. I myself am not a fan of something like Homestuck, I'm not a fan of, but if you want to sell more, you may have to wind up making some Homestuck fan art or Homestuck stuff just so that you can sell a lot more, because I'm a very small minority at anime conventions because I'm not a huge fan of Homestuck. And of course you can still make stuff for your favorite things, like your own personal favorite animes, but try not to go for stuff that's too underground, because then no one's gonna know what it is and it becomes an issue. Another thing that can be very helpful is crossover stuff. Crossovers can sell really well because people like to see their favorite things come together in some way, and you'll want to try and make it interesting for whoever sees it. This has been part 2 of my series about getting ready for Artist Alley if you're a beginner, and stick here for part 3 when we talk about determining prices for your work.